So, gentlemen, we have finally gotten to the final, super final, regular season final stretch. 14 games left. Man, can't even believe 14 games are left. You could
Very
say that a
detailed
number
final.
of different. Exactly. You could really, you could hear that and see that however you want to, good people. But 14 games are left in this season, Deshaun, and the Hawks, for all intents and purposes, are locked in as the 10 seed in the play-in tournament. There's really no way for them to bump up to 9, and quite honestly, no way to bump back to 11 and be out of the play. And that said, should Quin Snyder start resting players to avoid more injury? And the reason I thought about that, Deshaun, was because it scared the bejeebies out of me when Jalen Johnson went down and rolled over, and that was his ankle. I went back into the prayer closet. So it really got me to thinking: is this the time where maybe game management should be a thing?
First of all, I don't know exactly what bejeebies is, but if it was anything like what I felt when he went down, it was probably very similar to what you were feeling. It definitely did bring the thought, to our heads instantly, like, why is he in the game? Especially when it's not
You're
nearly
down
as
34.
competitive. Exactly. Um, in addition, I think that there has to be like a very fine balance there somewhere, because I don't necessarily know if you should just rest them without playing per se, because I'm not sure how much that's going to help you. I think this team needs more and more basketball, probably as much as it could probably get. But in the same breath, you don't want to have injuries. So I think just putting guys on minutes restrictions and things like that, or when things are clearly, number one, when things are clearly going off the rails, as we just talked about, they were. That's just at the top. That's where guys need to be sitting down. But as long as games are competitive, I think you kind of have to get a feel for it, and it's their playing time being kind of spotty. Because what I don't want to see happen is that we've all heard of the analogy: instead of playing to win, guys start playing not to lose. I think the more basketball you play, the better. I think you sometimes have a bigger risk at injury from not playing and putting those guys out on the floor than you do from them actually playing in games. So I think it's just a balance. But the stuff that just makes sense to the average basketball head or lack thereof, you have to make those kinds of decisions. You have to be sitting your guys, resting your guys, having real conversations with them about how they feel. Do they feel
Yeah.
good about it? Not making them feel like, because obviously there was a rule that was recently put in place, and I know this is
Mm-hmm.
something a little bit different, that if you don't play X amount of games, then you can't be considered for all NBA awards, MVPs, and other stuff like that. I know that this isn't exactly that, but that also created something to make guys feel like, I'm gonna give it a go, even though I know I probably shouldn't. Have those, sit down with your players, have those realistic conversations with them, and come to somewhat of like a happy medium, like a mutual agreement of them being on the floor and what they do and shouldn't be doing. Go out there and
Yeah.
shoot your jump shots and try to be competitive and whatever else, but don't try and go out there jumping over folks and clearing them like he did the other night. I'm not sure if I would be willing to go that extent. It's just hard to turn that switch off when you're a basketball player and when you are competitive. When that's just how you're wired, and you don't know nothing but to go out there and play hard every single night as long as you get on that floor, it's going to be a really hard sell to say anything different.
True.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that is kind of further, it seems like this is a Jalen Johnson episode, but like there's a conundrum with him too, right? Because he's one of the
Yep.
lead guys, like I mentioned earlier, with the most improved player. We know
Yep.
he plays 65 games,
65 games, and he's
and you
played
have to
51.
yep, and you have to play 20 minutes as well. So it,
Yeah.
going back to December, I think it was against the Cavaliers where he only played
Mm-hmm.
8 minutes because due to an injury, he had to
Yep.
come out of the game. So even if he does play these final 14, he will have to
He,
do a essentially file a grievance with the league in order to be eligible to take the award. So that's why I feel like that award is dumb. But to your question though, T, I feel like the whole Quin Snyder has some decisions to make because
yeah.
they are
Yeah.
in such a middling spot. They are
Yes.
3.5 games behind the Chicago Bulls. We all
Yep.
know that they have the tiebreaker, and they are 3.5 games in front of
In
the
front of the
Brooklyn
Nets,
Nets.
right? Yep.
Yes, in front of the Brooklyn Nets. So, and we know what the Nets are, and we know what the Chicago Bulls are. It's just they can't go anyway more than likely because
Yeah.
you look at the last 10 games. but the Nets and the Hawks, they're kind of right there in the same spot. So I think Quin Snyder is going to have to do probably one of his best coaching jobs because Onyeka Okongwu came back and had come back, and you have Jalen Johnson who had recently come back and he's been playing well, and it's just me, T. I'm on the side of winding this thing on down because but I feel like if you wind it down, you still end up in the 10th spot. From a perception standpoint, I just feel like it just wouldn't be a good look.
Yeah, and that's probably and Quin Snyder, just kind of knowing who he is, I don't know that he legit is going to be that person who says, okay, I'm just going to shut down so-and-so and such and such. And then he may not actually even have the choice to do it, quite honestly, because just like I said, I had concerns about Jalen being back too soon, and you still have him coming back, from the most recent injury. And I'm sure his body was probably close to 100% from the longer term injury earlier in the season, but still, in the back of your mind, that's what you're thinking about, because we're talking about ankles here, right? Mm-hmm. And then you think about DeAndre Hunter still on some type of minute restriction, coming off the bench. Bruno Fernando, Onyeka Okongwu, Wesley Matthews, those are officially listed as Jalen's backup. So you kind of then don't actually have a backup, if we're being honest, because Onyeka came back, and I know he's not 100%. Otherwise, he wouldn't have a super minutes restriction, right? And then the others are just, that ain't it. So I think, to you guys' earlier point, you almost don't have a choice but to kind of play your starters, because what's behind them, although you can't move up, and you probably would have a difficult time moving down from that 10 spot, ultimately speaking, the injuries may actually dictate what Quin Snyder is able to do, Deshaun. So for me, that then makes me shift gears, because you know where my mind goes. The reason that you don't have a lot of options is because you didn't do anything at the trade deadline. So as I have said before, and I will ask you guys again, maybe, just maybe, this is not a bad situation, because maybe this forces Landry Fields to say, hey, I'm going to have to really, Landry Fields and company, I'm going to really have to get after it in free agency, especially to shore up that front line. Maybe it applies pressure.
I'm not holding my breath on it. Or y'all, I'm serious. I'm not holding my breath.
Deshaun has no smile, no affect on his face.
Because listen, I don't. If so, y'all gonna be setting funeral arrangements tomorrow if I'm holding my breath. Let me tell you something. Realistic, Jarvis, and because you're from here, born and bred, and I feel like I've gone through just as much as the person who has been living here all their life and dealing with some of these things. Like I'm not confident that, let alone making a move in free agency, how big of a move that move is, because I'm not very confident they're going to make a big move, let alone a move, but making the right move to get the right piece, to get the right guys.
Yeah,
we've seen trades and other things, bringing Rudy Gay in here. That didn't last. You shipped him out. You brought Carmelo in here for an hour, and then he was out of here.
Wallace.
Rasheed came in for a day.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously.
Just been teased all our life, man.
And some of this stuff even goes, but you made a trade on Dominique for Danny Manning. Just stuff going on and on and on. And this being a market that you like to think people would come to, but I can't put any faith or any stock in that. The one thing that I am confident that you will get is you will get pieces that you do get a chance to draft. But then I have to have faith that you're going to make the right choices in terms of guys that you are going to draft. So, I what we're seeing right now, a lot of people are oblivious to it and want to point the fingers at players and want to point the fingers at coaches. But I think the reality here that we never talk about nearly enough is those people that are making decisions in the front office is a huge reason behind why we're seeing. I didn't think that the lack of bench contribution like we've been seeing this year could get any worse than we did when we saw it last year, where you had a couple Holiday brothers and all this other kind of stuff. That was bad enough already as it is. And then the expectations consistently getting high. Exactly. And the expectations, however, some way, somehow get higher for this team. I don't know how that works. So bench is the very first thing that you've got to address some way, somehow. I don't want to hear this guy's should be a pretty good key, contributor. I need guys. I need